All right. Good afternoon. It is the one and only Jonathan here with my really good friend and Tolkien reader, Isaiah. What's up, Isaiah?
Not much. How you doing?
Good, good. Yep. So tell me about yourself and how you've read Tolkien, like, or your experiences with, like, reading The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, how it's, like, impacted your life, if it has. So,
Yeah, so like I said, my name's Isaiah. I grew up reading Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. First time I read through the whole thing was in second grade, so like I've been
wait, The
around.
Hobbit?
No, Lord of the Rings.
Are you what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
You read?
I read Hobbit and Lord of the Rings in second grade.
Oh my gosh! What? Oh my gosh! I'm gonna scream.
But yeah, so I've grown up basically my whole life with Lord of the Rings. So kind of the way it's most influences me is just my love of fantasy in general. Like that's really what kickstarted it.
So okay, so you talked about how much the book has impacted you in second grade, which I mean, okay, what was the craziest thing I read in second grade? I can't even. Man, maybe I can't. I can. Okay, I can think that far back. I'm not that old, but certainly nothing like Lord of the Rings. Oh my gosh, that is a completely different trajectory. For me, probably like Thomas the Tank Engine, but that was like for 5-year-olds, so that doesn't not. It's not. Maybe the Magic Tree House series,
Those are good.
but yeah, that's not even comparable. Because what were your experiences with the with anything with the movies?
I don't remember specifically when I first saw the movies. It was definitely pretty young, but not as far back as reading the books. Definitely.
For me, my first what were you gonna say?
No, I wasn't gonna say anything.
For me, my first experience was the movies. I think my dad. This is like going super far back. My dad had a copy of a VHS copy of I think Return of the King. I don't know if he ever. I never talked about Lord of the Rings with my dad. Maybe a little bit, but he had a VHS copy of like obviously the theatrical release because I don't even think you can fit all of the. You can't because that'd be like 2 VHS tapes.
Yeah.
For the extended edition if they did release it on VHS. That was like the only time I ever watched it up until I think like later on in my life. And then I kind of forgot where I first watched Fellowship and Two Towers. But it was like 2000 maybe 6 or 7 when we watched it on VHS at our first house. Nothing crazy up until. Oh man, I think by the time of high school, I definitely watched Fellowship and then Return, or I watched Fellowship and then Two Towers and then Return. I did have a pretty nerdy friend at the time that's probably where I watched it at. But when the Hobbit movies were getting released, I watched the Hobbit movies with a really good friend of mine by the name of Samuel. His dad worked in the downtown area of Lodi, and they have a movie theater. So basically, from middle school onward, because it came out when I was in middle school, the first one we watched the first one, then we watched the next one. I think there were 4, because they kind of squeezed out. There's supposed to be like I think 3 or 4, because they squeezed out a whole movie for the Battle of Five Armies.
Yeah, there's 3 of them, I believe.
The Hobbit movies. Unexpected Journey, Desolation of Smog. Okay, this is not gonna be. Yeah, Battle of Five Armies. Yeah, I guess there's 3. Then, like, I forgot which one. Like, cause yeah, 2012, 2013, 2014. Yeah, that's super close together. Yeah, we would watch that even after he, I think, left my high school, and like he was going to a different high school. We still like met up to watch the Battle of the Five Armies. So it was like a nice little like get together thing that we still did. And then that was all kind of like that's great, but what really kind of kick-started the nerdy thing was I actually suggested to my person at my private Christian high school, like, oh, let's set aside like an hour or like 2 hours to learn about stuff we want to learn about. And one of the teachers, Mr. Tocoli, he was the Tolkien guy. Like, he started in that like 1 to 2 hour block on like that happened like once every 2 weeks. It was called Talking Tolkien with Tocoli or something, and he explained everything from like the Silmarillion from the I'm not even going to remember it off the top of my head. Let me pull it out and let me ask you how to pronounce it because I do not know how to pronounce it at all. It is. He went every. How do you? Okay, which one is? How do you pronounce that?
The Valaquinta?
Oh no, the one above that.
First one. My Elvish isn't great either.
Yeah, exactly. He went everything from literally the first. Yeah. Ainulindale. Ainulindal. From everything from there to the Valaquinta, which obviously is super easy to say, to the Silmarillion. I think he fast tracked the Silmarillion part, and then he talked about like the Akalabeth, and then he went on to like the main story.
Yeah.
But he went from the creation to like the end, and even covered the unreleased sequel to the Lord of the Rings that never got published, which is actually part of this book set.
Wow.
Yeah, like very vaguely. And I remember him talking about it, and I was just like, yeah, probably a good idea to like not write that. And then I don't know if he ever went over. I know I watched it in a video where, like, technically like we're in like the 4th or 5th age right now, but that's getting too much into the weed of things. Yeah, and then like I would always watch. I don't know if you've watched them. Those lore videos on YouTube.
No, not really.
Really, you don't watch those?
No.
Oh, I love those. Like, just to what if like, and sometimes they do stuff like, oh, what if Bilbo, what if Tom Bombadil got the ring, like kind of, or like took it over? They would do, or what if like the Eagles like took the Fellowship all the way to Mordor instead? Like, then they'll explore that. There's so many of those channels, but let's finally jump right into the topic at hand for once.
All right.
So I think the best part about Two Towers is it's kind of like, but not really, how do you say it, like Empire Strikes Back for Star Wars, but like a lot of the bulk happens. I think one of the most interesting things where it diverts from obviously the movies, because like the pacing would be really bad if it's a movie, would be when Boromir dies. Yeah, that was I think that's the most obvious. Like, okay, if you watch, like, did you just watch the movies instead of read the book? Would be that.
Yeah, his funeral, you mean?
No, he dies in the first chapter of Two Towers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then his funeral, and then they don't light the bow on fire, do they? I don't remember.
Nope. Yeah, they send it down the river, and then we learn later that Faramir found his brother's body.
I was like, wait, are they gonna like light the boat on fire? Kind of like maybe like a Norse-ish thing that happens, or that's when I was reading when it was in chapter, I think it was it of Herbs and Student Rabbit. I think it was. Yep, it was something past. Yeah, the window to west. There was a. Yep. Yeah, that's what got me. I was like, wait a second, like Faramir ends up seeing Boromir's, like, that is absolutely crazy. Just so happens. Yep. That was a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I think the breaking was definitely gonna have to happen. What was your impression, if you kind of could recall, when you read it, when you reread it recently? Because I think you reread it recently, right? Like last year.
Yeah, it was probably within the last year. Yeah, I think the breaking was definitely not something in the original plan. Like Aragorn said, he was gonna go with Frodo into Mordor if he could, but then once the attack happens and Boromir dies and Merry and Pippin get hauled off, they kind of didn't have any other choice. Like, he wasn't going to abandon two of the members of the party, and Frodo and Sam, while they might certainly be in danger, they were kind of going off and made that decision to face it themselves, while Merry and Pippin definitely needed the help. So once that was kind of set into action, then yeah, I think it was kind of inevitable.
Yeah, for me it was like for Merry and Pippin, and then for Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn. I think the craziest part was like, imagine having to like go and do something else, and in the back of your head the entire time you're like, man, I really hope the two most important people, or the most important person, Frodo, is okay and actually still carrying out, and you just have no clue if those three, or those 3, 4, 5, those 5, including also Gandalf the White later on, have no clue at all if it's actually going to work out or not. And then I don't know if that persists into Return of the King, where like that's why they do the distraction, but that's a topic for a different time. I actually, in my first reading of it, my first ever reading of Two Towers, it was also like sort of disjointed. I just kind of picked it up and started reading it. I thought the first battle was the Battle of Helm's Deep, and it was that quick. It wasn't when Rohan and I forgot if it was the captain of the guard or if the name of the not Treebird, the writers of Rohan.
Yeah.
Who was the? I think one of the best parts about the whole entire story is like how exhaustingly like Gimli would insult somebody, and then like they would, or like people will insult people, and then they'll like do like a de-escalation situation, then they'll like end up like kind of like not gratituding each other, but they will end up like oh, like it's okay now. What was his name?
Éomer?
Yeah, I think. Pursuit. Yep. It was. Nope. Yep. What were your thoughts on any of the parts with the Ents? I think that's one I definitely want to ask you about.
I think the Ents are my favorite part. Giant, intelligent trees is super cool.
Constantly, basically, not constantly, but basically ask, oh, hey, so like where did the Entwives go? And then you just, even as like a reader, I kind of knew because the professor did mention it, but then I kind of did remember about it from a lore video where like earlier there was like a rumor about like moving trees, either in Bree or at like one of the Hobbit, like not bars, at the one the Hobbit like stops. They're like not gossiping, but they're like in the bar talking, and they were talking, someone saw like a tree that moved. The teacher pointed that out. So like that was like, oh, the Ents, they never traveled that far out, and they could have if that rumor turned out to be the Entwives moving, they could have just been just across the mountains. That's one thing about the Lord of the Rings that I can definitely get into later, is distances, and like people just kind of just stay put for like 800 years, and like they do not travel at all. When I think the best part about the Ents is, other than them not knowing who like hobbits were, was I'll give you the PDF, but in the later parts of the classes week we were supposed to read, it ended up not being like assigned, or we didn't do a class discussion on it, was On Fairy Stories by Tolkien, and was basically not an essay, it was a lecture that went from lecture to paper, and it's just Tolkien at like University of Edinburgh or something, I forgot which university, talking about like fairy stories and magical, and then also like blasting a particular let me see if I can pull it up here, blasting a particular like fairy story creator. I think it, Because I don't know. She never gave us essay at Andrew Lang Lectures at St. Andrews. He blasts a particular one. Yeah, Drayden's Nymphidia. There's like the first couple there's like 2 pages worth of him just completely blasting it. But one thing that seemed kind of obvious, and then the teacher also kind of talked about it when we were going over Sir Orfeo, was the presence of like the Ents are clearly like on the good side, like, and I'm using like air quotations for that because he explicitly stated we're not on any side when they first meet, when Treebeard meets Merry and Pippin. But then as soon as he like I think finds out that like they're killing the forest down the way, kind of like in the movie, that's when they're like, okay, well, we're against Saruman at least. So that part was interesting, and I brought up fairy stories because it was like fairy world is like this other world where there isn't it's not necessarily like a heaven, or it's not necessarily like a hell, and it's not necessarily demonic, but it's this other part that's like a secular kind of other not alternative universe, and that's where I think the Ents kind of embody is this kind of like we're just here doing our own thing, which is basically doing nothing other than like drinking water. But the moment that, and they were, I don't know, I kind of forgot in the lore if they were made by the Valar. I think they were. But the moment they have a problem, they basically join the good side. So it was where even like the natural, it was getting basically corrupted by Saruman and like the machinations of the orcs and of evil. I mean, because and more like industry, which happens later on in Return of the King. What were your thoughts on like the Ents past that? Like, do you have any thoughts on like their actions or how they interacted with Merry and Pippin?
Yeah, so I think the Ents, in a way, are kind of similar to Tom Bombadil in that they're kind of a manifestation of Middle-earth itself. They're not involved in the workings of the beings in the world. They're just kind of there. When something from the world outside affects them, they will respond, but they're not involved in the matters of the world. They kind of just are Middle Earth in a way.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense. I mean, like, Men of Bree aren't going to come down all the way to Gondor. That's kind of a stretch to even say. But they're the epitome of just staying in one. Okay, well they didn't stay. Okay, well they didn't stay in one place. They talked about being in. We can finally reference the map here. They talked about being in the Brownlands for a while, which is right there. I forgot how long, and then they moved to. It's covering that. That's weird. Where they go to the Fangorn Forest right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because on the map, it's like how we're looking at it here. It's probably maybe less than a year's journey to. I don't know how it would be for trees. Well, they were able to make it to Helm's Deep pretty quickly after going to Isengard.
Yeah.
But it would have literally been right here where they would have seen the possible sighting of the Entwise. But to go back to your point where they're part of Middle Earth and part of like the other world, they never like move. And then that also goes to the case with Tom Bombadil, because he literally is like, okay, well, I can go anywhere I want, but these are my arbitrary borders and I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
Which ends up working really well, at least because the Barrow Downs are still within his arbitrary borders, which was the funniest part about Return of the Fellowship was like you get like one get out of jail free card when Frodo gets injured, and that's it.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the friendship? Now this is I think the one best part about Two Towers was it fleshed out in all three different Frodo, Sam, and then later on Gollum, then Gimli, Aragorn, and what's his name, Legolas, and then Merry and Pippin. How is friendship? What do you think about the friendship aspect in either of these groups? That's like, what was your kind of takeaway reading it, and if you can kind of remember reading it a long time ago, because like the whole, it's not second book, but the whole fourth book is literally just the friendship between Frodo and Sam, and then how do we deal with Gollum, like basically stalking us the entire time. But do you have any thoughts on the friendship and loyalty aspects of the story?
Yeah, so not just in Two Towers, but through the whole thing, between a lot of different characters, we see these fellowships playing a big part. You mentioned Frodo and Sam. We see Legolas and Gimli grow to become close friends between Aragorn and Éomer. I think a lot of that's just kind of Tolkien's philosophy and outlook towards life. Like, I feel like community was something that was very important to him. And like, we know him and C.S. Lewis were very close friends. But just kind of writing that sort of thing into this, like how they all relied on each other to get through the things that they were facing.
Yeah, I think one of the most stark parts about reading it, technically the second time, was I thought the whole like counting how many like orcs I've killed moment at Helm's Deep and like between Legolas and Gimli, I thought that was just like a movie thing, and then it ended up being a book thing too, which was kind of funny.
Yeah.
I think oh man, there's just so much. I think because like there was definitely that like arbitrary like distrust after I think the events of some parts of the Silmarillion, where orcs and elves and dwarves have extreme mistrust, but then you can kind of see it coming back over the course of Two Towers. Like Legolas basically, I think by the time when they get in the chapter Riders of Rohan, where they basically get cornered, and like I think Gimli like basically insults the human. Like Legolas is basically willing to die for Gimli in that moment.
Yeah.
It was only thanks to Aragorn where like it just ended up not happening, obviously. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, for the sake of the plot, it won't. But that was like already by the time of Two Towers, there was this pretty rock solid friendship that was happening. I think for me, I think when I was reading the tail end of book 4, was like Sam was still willing to just kind of go with what Frodo wanted to do with Gollum. That definitely does take a lot of loyalty. Someone in class mentioned like there could also be that other dynamic where he's also technically like his boss.
Yeah.
But when there's like the workplace, you can like people like, I mean, it's a little bit of a different dynamic in the Shire, but I think it's being able to like accept a decision that your friend made, even if you don't think it's in the best interest, is definitely like a long shot, like proving that you're still friends with this person.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think do you have any thoughts on, do you have any like particular memories about the ring, at least in Two Towers?
I think
that kind of like stood out to you.
so. If I'm remembering plots correctly, the ring doesn't play as much of a role in Two Towers as it does in Fellowship and Return of the King, because Fellowship is kind of setting up the backstory and figuring out what has to be done with the ring. And then Return of the King, obviously, it's kind of that final push to get there and destroy it. Two Towers, it's there, and it's definitely having an influence on Frodo and Smeagol, but it's not so much. I mean, ultimately, it is the driver of everything that they're trying to do. But if I'm remembering how things went, it's not as much a driver of individual plot points as it is in the first and third books.
Yeah, I think that's also like a decent breath of relief, because you kind of see it, like, because in Fellowship of the Ring you could see it like basically like Frodo accidentally putting it on, and like you're like, oh, okay. But in I think one part I liked in particular was when Samwise had to end up using it. So at the end, like, I don't even know if it's, I forgot if it's in the movie, but where Frodo gets captured by orcs.
Yeah.
Sam has the decision to put it on, and he does, and he kind of like, I think, concurs and like, yeah, I wish I never even had to put this ring on to begin with.
Yeah.
That is the best. That is one of the better parts about Two Towers, is seeing it kind of resisted, but seeing that evil kind of resisted and corruption, and then getting introduced more so. Now we obviously remember Gollum a little bit from The Hobbit, but seeing it how it truly affected Gollum. I had a bookmark, and I found it just now, how much the ring corrupted Gollum, Smeagol, to the point where he couldn't even. There was a Myth Lore journal article about it. Do you read Myth Lore at all?
No.
Myth Lore is basically like the go-to place for Tolkien scholarship. I'll send you the link later. And I forgot which person pointed it out in their article, but like Gollum was so corrupted by the ring after all those years that like he couldn't even eat the lembas bread.
Yeah.
If you need a double look at it, it's on the rightmost page. He couldn't even eat it. He couldn't eat even cooked fish. Like, I think he couldn't even eat. Yeah, he had to just eat it raw. So you can kind of see where the ring and Saruman's evil influence corrupting what was essentially I think a good being. I forgot the halflings that Smeagol came from. I think there were just halflings east of the mountains.
Yeah, so I think they were kind of ancestors of the hobbits, not necessarily what would be called hobbits, but similar to and what would later become hobbits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And I think, yeah, then hit like over the years how it corrupted him, and like he can't even like eat cooked goods. He can't eat lembas. One, because it smells like elves, but then two, it's like actually nourishment, but then it's like a good form of nourishment. And there is a little bit of reading in from like Catholics about like, oh, this could be like the Eucharist or whatever. But I have my own opinions on that part. But of course, a being that's like pure evil cannot eat that or eat lembas. So that part was interesting. But more so, I think the best parts about Two Towers, and we can kind of talk about Gollum a little bit, and like evil, was how much like every single part where it talks about Gollum like just stalking the group, you have these little like oh yeah, like, oh, I saw like this weird shadow creature, and it's like Gollum, and like the I forgot what they call the Rangers of that one, or when the Gondorian Rangers, like,
yeah, of
Ithilien, like it's like, oh yeah, we saw this thing, and like kind of stalking us, and then they basically have to choose to kill it or not. Then they end up not killing Gollum at the behest of Frodo.
Yep.
It's just so funny throughout the whole book. You just like, it's like the like any mention of Gollum before he formally meets like Frodo and Sam. I just find those parts, or like any kind of like, or like, yeah, the Gondor men, I just find those parts so funny, just for some reason, because they're describing this like thing that's following you, and like how Tolkien goes about like describing it. I just find that hilarious for some reason. But What else? How now reading in your rereading? I think one thing that really stood out to me, especially in at the beginning of the book like when Boromir dies, and then everyone kind of goes through that depressed spell. But then also like in the book 4, how just like it basically most of the story is just, I think one reason why I didn't like even wanting to read it for the longest time is it's just super sad all the time because and like even when I was watching, I think Return of the King, I could feel like the despair because every single scene that had Frodo and Sam in it, in I don't know if it was also Two Towers too. I forgot where in the movies they see Minas Morgul at, if it was in Two Towers or Fellowship, but it always seemed like super scary, like super scary, at least when I was a kid watching it. How have you been able to like both reading it and or reading not just Two Towers but also like Lord of the Rings? Did you ever notice that like despair part at all playing a key role, or how much like Sam and Frodo have to go through, or?
Yeah, and I think you're definitely right. It's supposed to be kind of a depressed tale because when you look at it from everything they knew, they had basically zero chance. They're like, you would send 2 hobbits into Mordor, Sauron's stronghold, through probably millions of orcs to try and destroy the ring. Like, what kind of a plan is that? But it was the only chance they had, and if they didn't do that, Sauron would win. So it's basically kind of a hopeless situation. So it's definitely going to reflect that because, like, against the kind of might that Sauron had, there's really nothing you can do. But at the same time, it also gives you these moments of hope. And I think that's a lot of what Tolkien was trying to do with these books. Because, like, he lived through World War I, fought in it, lived through World War II. Like, if you were living in Europe through those decades, it was a scary place. I mean, it did not look like a hopeful time for the future. But in Lord of the Rings, despite everything that's going on, you still have moments of hope. There are still friends and allies in the world. There's, like Sam says, there's still good things in the world, and they're worth fighting for. And so even in the despair that we see in the books, they still keep pushing on, keep up hope, and just even when things are dark, they keep on keeping on.
That's literally like, I think that's literally the name of a Japanese pop song I love listening to. Now, I think you kind of almost, I think you basically hit on it, the hope aspect, and I did not realize it. I don't know if I too long ago in high school, but there's I don't know if I think when I was doing my research, it was brought up in fairy stories, but Tolkien made basically something called eucatastrophe, which is the opposite of a catastrophe. But let's see what Tolkien Gateway has to say about it. Eucatastrophe is a neologism, which is a fancy literati term, definitely nothing else, coined by Tolkien from the Greek bless you, good, and some Greek word I can't pronounce, sudden turn. So in essence, a eucatastrophe is a massive turn in fortune from seeing an unconquerable situation to an unforeseen victory, usually brought by grace rather than heroic effort. Now that part's interesting. Such a turn in catastrophic in the sense of its breadth and surprise, and positive in that a great evil or misfortune is averted. Okay, where can we think of that happening in Two Towers? It's pretty obvious, but I'm gonna let you.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple in there. I'd say first one that comes to mind is the Ents. Like, no one had planned for them. No one probably even knew they existed, with the possible exception of Gandalf. The fact that Merry and Pippin just happened to wander into Fangorn and find one, and are able to bring down Isengard with their help. That's one. I'd say Gandalf coming back. Like, can you imagine reading
Oh my gosh,
Two
yeah.
Towers when it first came out, and you get to that scene and wait, Gandalf's back? Like that. Like that's
Gandalf's
definitely an incredible turn for the better.
And I gotta I gotta Google here really quick and pretend like I know, but like when did the Simmer? I don't think no. The professor. That's one thing the professor hit home was the Silmarillion didn't come out yet, so you never had before the Hobbit and then the Lord of the Rings, or the revised Hobbit and then the Lord of the Rings. You had no clue about, possibly no clue about, except for very 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 small references. I don't know if it's, I completely forgot if it's in the appendix or not, where there's like this whole different like continent basically filled with the Valar. You had no clue.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, if you were first reading that and Gandalf returns back with only some of his memories as the White, yeah, that must have been, that must, oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I'm kind of like with most things is like, oh man, I really wish I didn't know like what ends up happening. Because then like the impact would hit a lot harder. But that's a really good point. If you're first reading that and Gandalf comes back, like that's like was not, you never would probably think that would happen. Because was there anything in this? There was nothing. Yeah, there was nothing in before Two Towers where someone would randomly come back. No, there wasn't. Like including The Hobbit. For release order, not for chronological in universe order. Gandalf. That's a eucatastrophe moment. Then also not just the Ents to Isengard, but also the Ents at Helm's Deep. That was super interesting. Where I'm a-okay with the movie changing it, but also like basically they're not backs against the wall, but they were all the way up in like the keep in Helm's Deep, and then in the cave, which I think are separated in the book. Not like part of the same thing in the movie, and the Ents come in last minute, and then I think the funniest part, Ents coming in last minute, having another story eucatastrophe beat, and then I think the funniest part is like the tree's not talking or doing anything, so you have all these like riders of Rohan, I think, riding out, which once was like a plain, and now it's a forest, and there's a whole bunch of, and I think in the book, it wasn't funny, but it was like you could, when they were riding through it towards Isengard, the small troop with Gandalf, the king of Rohan, they were like hear like screams, like
yeah. Orcs did not have a fun time that day.
Oh man, I'm not gonna lie, the moment when they reach Isengard or Isengard and like the ring, and like there's this like Merry and Pippin were just waiting there. For some reason when I was reading it, I thought they like turned. I don't get it, even though they didn't. And for like a moment, I was like, "Wait, what the heck is going on here?" And then having it like explained. That was, I think, the funniest part is having things explained after the fact when they happen. So like when Gandalf goes with the king and like I think 30 men to Isengard to confront Saruman because he's clearly lost at that point. You see Merry and Pippin like smoking tobacco, which is also that part is definitely interesting. Was kind of foreboding is, wait, how did Saruman get this like tobacco weed? Okay, I clearly remember, never in the movies, but I remember that hearing about the scourging of the Shire and the scourging of the Shire before I read this part of Two Towers. But like I felt when I was reading that part, because basically the only way they were able to smoke was because they had like barrels of tobacco from. So like Saruman knew about the Shire at least. I felt that part was kind of like a foreboding.
Definitely.
For the future. Now that's like not like post hoc justification, but it was definitely like a post like okay, well I know because I know like the plot, but I got that feeling.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a bit of foreshadowing for the end of Return of the King.
Mm-hmm. I think the other funny part too was how bad the good people are. Now they talked about this in Fellowship, but I like how bad the good guys are in like containing evil. Like and this goes to when, I don't know how Saruman like leaves Orthanc, the tower from the Ents that were supposed to guard it, but didn't do that good of a job. Is I think good is too good for good itself, because like Golem escapes the Mirkwood elves, I don't know if they're still Sylvan, because they were like, oh yeah, we just let Golem like out of his cage basically. And for the longest time, like when I was rewatching the movie in class, I thought that it was just a story beat that he wasn't let out of Mordor on purpose, and that like and Gandalf just kind of said it just to make it like faster in Fellowship of the Ring. But he ends up, Golem says it near the end of Two Towers, where Golem was let out of Mordor by Sauron to get caught on purpose. That part was interesting too about the book. But what else can we cover? I think I think the battle scene in I think Helm's. Let's do a versus here really quick. Which battle do you think was better, in terms of like if you kind of remember it and like and if you can kind of compare it in your head really quick? Would you say Battle of Five Armies or Helm's Deep?
Oof. I don't know. It's hard to compare. I'd say it's kind of a comparison between four big ones. It's like in order. It's Battle of Five Armies in The Hobbit, Helm's Deep in Two Towers, then the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and the Battle at the Black Gate in Return of the King. I couldn't really decide between those four. They're all pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in Five Armies, you basically have everybody at each other's throats. Then they all come together literally last minute.
Yeah.
Each race, which kind of like contrasts to the old alliances in like the Silmarillion, and then in the last great alliance of elves and men.
Yep.
You kind of have that kind of return again.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and it's actual, like they're all there. Whereas in the Lord of the Rings, they're all kind of like fighting their own battles somewhere else. Like I forgot where the dwarves were at, or if they were active in Return of the King at all. Then the elves, and then men fighting. Yeah, that's tough. I don't know. I think definitely an interesting part of the story. I know for Gandalf, it was I think kind of interesting. I don't know. I kind of forgot. I think the professor, like especially like before the battle happens, pointed out why didn't Gandalf just immediately kill Wormtongue? It's like the moment when he got in, because he was able to get his staff by I forgot the captain of the guard's name, Gama that died that died at the battle. Was he kind of like basically had to convince / finally was able to get Wormtongue away from him. But what else? How were your thoughts on book 3 covers just 2 of the different parties, and then book 4 covers just like Frodo and Sam. What were your favorite parts of book 3? Other than the Ents, or then I can include the Ents, or like any particular scene you can kind of remember that stands out in your memory right now.
I mean, Helm's Deep, definitely a highlight. I think the scene where they meet Gandalf the White for the first time, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, I think that's definitely like a big wow moment, like I was saying earlier.
Mm-hmm. I think, man, the way that Tolkien kind of wrote like how the Ents talk all the time, I just enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even like trying to, because I think most people would enjoy it. Just like I think the way and then like it, man, it is sad reading whenever the Entwives are brought up. I know I'm bringing it up again, but like it's like, man, like,
Yeah.
but it was also one of those aspects of Tolkien's world where, since it's left up to kind of like a mystery, it is kind of makes it not more entertaining, but more mysterious, not magical.
Yeah.
That there's still, I think, whenever Rohan's mentioned, or the men of Rohan, I don't know if it was Aragorn or Gandalf that mentioned that they don't write anything down, but they like sing everything in song. And that was also one thing where, yeah, like they're old, like, children's tales come true, which actually, oh my gosh, you can kind of see the fairy world aspect kind of play out with the Rohan in Helm's Deep, when you basically have a children's fairy tale, not in how me and you would know it, but how they would know it, basically coming real and then saving the day. If you really, and then like, and just like what on earth happened? Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like imagine like, I can't think of an equivalent for either of us, but like, that must have been like completely wild and trippy. Like, oh my gosh, like you're at, like, all your buddies are dead, you're in the castle, you're like one of the few, like, imagine yourself as like a rider of Rohan, and you're like one of the last few that's alive, and then literally you end up like getting saved by what you were told by like your grandma, and was like, oh yeah, no, it's not. And then you get told later on when you're an adult, it's like, oh yeah, that was just bogus, don't worry about it. Yeah, we don't go to Fanghorn Fort, we don't ever leave the frontier borders at all. All we know is like probably like the orcs and like some kinds of evil, and then like the wild men around, the Endwaith, which, by the way, yeah, the west, not Westernlings, but the wild men that Saruman kind of ensnares, that were like, they kind of live over here.
Yeah, the Dunlendings.
Oh yeah, Dunlendings, yeah, which is definitely fleshed out, and I would recommend watching for in War of the Rohirrim. That was.
Oh yeah, I still need to see that.
I got a copy of it if you want to watch it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's nice because it doesn't, like, it's literally, there are some like, the rings. This guy's like looking for a ring, but like it's nothing where it's like pivotal plot. It's side plot, which makes it a lot more, the characters are able, the director and the writers are able to like kind of flesh out a side character a lot more, which is actually kind of a breath of fresh air. It's kind of like looking into like the commoner of Rohan, even though it's like or seeing the people of Rohan.
Yeah.
And there's also a more female focused story, which is actually kind of good. But what else for book 3? I think one thing was kind of interesting, how words can sway people. You can see, like, once even Saruman is completely defeated, he is still able to basically, if Gandalf the White wasn't there, he was basically going to be able to sway the Rohirrim, the men of Rohan, to his side. And when they went to go confront him, that part was kind of interesting. How like even after you're all completely defeated, evil can still kind of like have this corrupting influence.
Yeah.
What other parts ended up being interesting? Let me look at the map. I don't know why the lines aren't popping up. Oh. Maybe because there's too many lines now. Oh, that's why. Here, let's... Yep, that's... I guess Pippin goes a little... Mary doesn't then. Boromir. What else can we go over? I think one of the more interesting parts about Two Towers is how you can kind of see in the 4th book. So we already covered like the friendship aspect, where like basically it's both the sense of friendship and loyalty to do whatever Frodo was saying, but also trusting him enough to do the right thing. Yeah, the journey of the crossroads. She loves. I think I was looking up that was man. That was I think the most interesting part about Shelob is the fact that like in the book, like I don't know if it was in the book when Sam was overhearing. I don't know if it was overhearing or if it was a narrator point. How like she's just basically like, I think it's literally she's referred to as like Sauron's cat.
Yeah.
Those scenes were definitely, even in the, especially in the movie, were super scary. But I think that Tolkien kind of brought it up as something that is as ancient as each. I think except for, I don't remember exactly in Return of the King, but in Fellowship and in Two Towers, you have beings that they're. Shelob is basically on her own team. She's just pure evil.
Yeah.
But for the Balrog is a little bit more aligned with Sauron. You see these ancient, really super ancient beings reintroduced from the first stage, and I think maybe even before that, because I know Balrogs are Maya. I forgot if Shelob isn't Maya exactly, but I forgot if the spider was that bore her. You see different evil beings that aren't exactly Sauron. Even technically Saruman, like when he like, even though he's like Sauron aligned, he's still doing it out of that lust and quest for evil power. That part is interesting, where you can kind of see glimpses of other beings that aren't. I think Shelob is more not aligned with Sauron than the Balrog in Fellowship, at least. So you see another evil being that isn't aligned, but is still completely terrifying. Yeah. What else? I think anything stand out to you while reading it, in particular?
I think in book 4, following Frodo and Sam's journey, I think Gollum or Gollum/Smeagol, depending on which part you're on, is kind of the most interesting character that we see in this, because previously, before Two Towers, all you know him as is this creepy, evil little guy. Like he wants the precious, he wants the ring, and he doesn't really care what he has to do to get it. And we hear Gandalf talking about Bilbo having pity on Gollum, and it's hard to understand, like, why would you give pity to this thing? Like there's no redeeming quality to Gollum. Why would you save him? But then in Two Towers, you really do start to pity him. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't exactly a nice person before he found the ring. I mean, he murdered his cousin for it, but like 500 years with that thing, he does kind of start to become a character that you can have empathy and pity for and feel bad. And as you see his different sides debate, as you see him flip between Gollum and Smeagol, you're rooting for Smeagol to win. You're rooting for Smeagol to kind of take control and become a better person. I don't know. It feels kind of weird to call Gollum a person at that point. Because I don't know. He's not exactly a rational thing. He's driven pretty much by one purpose. But you want Smeagol to take control, and he almost does. He comes very close to becoming something better than he used to be. But then ultimately, obviously, falls away from that and baits them into Shelob's lair to try and get the ring back for himself. So I think he's kind of the most intriguing character in this section of it.
This is like, I don't know if it's the only one, but I think, gosh, I actually bookmarked it. This is the only time, maybe the only time he ever refers to himself as I. And I think it was when, hold on, let me reread. I'll just reread the two, they're not paragraph, the two passages. So it's page 280 of our book, and the black gate is closed. Is it not guarded? Asked Frodo sternly. And did you escape out of the darkness, Smeagol? Were you not rather permitted to depart upon an errand? That at least is what Aragorn thought, who found you by the dead marshes some years ago. It is a lie, hissed Gollum. I'm not going to do a different voice. That is not going to happen here. An evil light came into his eyes, and at the naming of Aragorn, he lied to me. He lied on me. That's interesting. That's definitely, man. That's definitely like a 1940s or 1930s English thing you do not see anymore. He lied on me. Yes, he did. I did escape all by my poor self. Indeed, I was told to seek for the precious, and I have searched and searched. Of course, I have, but not for the black one. The precious was ours. It was mine. I tell you, I did escape. That is literally, yeah, and it was so obvious that like they like that Tolkien had to made it even more like obvious where in the next paragraph Frodo felt a strange certainty that in this matter Gollum was for once not so far from the truth as might be expected, that he had somehow found a way out of Mordor and at least believed that it was by his own cunning. For one thing, he noted that Gollum used I.
Yeah.
And that seemed usually to be a sign on its rare appearances that some remnants of old truth and sincerity were for the moment on top. But even if Gollum could be trusted on this point, Frodo did not forget the wiles, the Wiles.
Yeah, wiles.
The wiles of the enemy. The escape, the quote escape, may be allowed or arranged, as well known in the Dark Tower. And in any case, Gollum was plainly keeping a good deal back. And then later on, Sam hears that basically he was let go on purpose. So Gollum was actually probably telling the truth, and then for his own accounting of it, but then he was let out on purpose. They kind of just let him escape, and then they let him escape through the Shelob corridor, I think. That was also mentioned too.
Yeah, Sirathungel.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that part was the one time he actually uses I.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think the best, like I mentioned it earlier, the best part about this, one of my favorite parts was Faramir coming with the realization. Well, not Faramir realizing his brother died. I kind of forgot. His brother, not like his older brother dying, but like, Faramir literally saw his dead brother going down the river, and like it wasn't like a dream sequence. That part was, I think that's one of the more favorable. That's one of the more favorite parts. However, how tragic it was, where I found a massive payoff for as a reader. Now, because that's the thing about the Two Towers is we covered Eucatastrophe, covered any other. I'm trying to think of, there's like temptations or like draw. I think one part I did find interesting, which is not the most serious one, was I think when they were going through, let's see if the map pulls it up. Let me do Frodo and Sam. When they were going through, it's not going to zoom again, but I think we can. It was when they were going through Minas Morgul area and that little, I guess you can kind of see like the little valley. That was interesting. I don't know. Oh crap. Okay, I kind of forgot if it was in this little valley or if it was when they finally made it to the plain. But I don't think they made it to the plateau of Gorgoroth. It could have been the plateau of Gorgoroth. I gotta double check. But one thing that was really, really interesting was how Tolkien described how silent it was. I don't think I bookmarked it. Was how silent the entire plateau was. Dang, it was definitely after. Yeah. No, that was them describing it. Not the Forbidden Pool. that was the most interesting part to me was the complete silence that Frodo and Sam and were experiencing, and then I think there was an army that passes them, and for a moment the ring kind of gets noticed by I think a ring wraith, one of the Nazgul.
Yeah.
And I think in the latter part, the Tempton part definitely made it to the movies, when I think they were like hiding next to one of the main bridges and roads. That part kind of stood out to me too, and that was definitely definitely because you don't see it as much like you mentioned earlier in the book, where you see like the ring playing another role, and then we're kind of past an hour here, but I have to bring up the best part about all of Two Towers, other than anything relating to the Ents, anything relating to Gandalf the White, but how even in like this, oh my gosh, Frodo, near the end of the book, Frodo gets taken by the two orcs, or not goblins, two orcs, and I just marked it because it was like, when Sam had to put on the ring, he finally works up the courage, in the final chapter, in the final couple of pages, he works up the courage. He runs to try to save his master, and then the door slams right in front of him. Let me show you the last page, at least on this edition. I found that to be the funniest, like, you got to be kidding me part. Now, obviously, I think I would double check on Google really quick, but he published the whole thing at once as one big book, but like in a series of 3. We double check, because you finish Two Towers and you're like, oh, so yeah, the two other groups, Pippin, Merry, they're good. They're now with, not Boromir. They're with Aragorn and company. Before I think they separate again. But let's talk about the movie. Jeez. Okay, so it looks like, according to the Tolkien estate, thank you Tolkien estate, which, what the heck is this? Oh, apparently, yeah, Fellowship of the Ring published in 1954, and then, which kind of makes sense because I don't know if I completely forgot if it's covered in Shippey, but like they basically wanted more hobbits when he was after the Hobbit. They wanted more presence of hobbits, and I guess he definitely needed to release Fellowship of the Ring before, because you do see hobbits in Two Towers, but they're basically not the primary focus of it. It's split between 3 different parties, with one of those having no hobbits whatsoever. And then followed by Two Towers and The Return of the King in 1955. And also because the book was so large that for material reasons it came out as 3 volumes, which and this is why has ever since wrongly considered a trilogy. Interesting. They were mentioning that in the first part of Shippey, that in this, and after the class, if you want to read it, you can borrow it from me for a while. I definitely recommend it. I'm actually a little bit surprised you never read it. That there's all these like book polls that if the Lord of the Rings were counted as not one book but as 3 books, 3 separate books, instead of it being like 50 million copies sold, it would be like 150 million copies sold, because you have like 2 more books to sell at the same time.
Yeah.
So it looks, imagine, I guess in that case, just imagine like Two Towers coming out, and then just in this hypothetical scenario, just waiting like another year or 2 years until the next book comes out, Return of the King. Like that would have, thank goodness both were published at once. But then it goes back to what you previously stated about Gandalf, was when Gandalf dies in Fellowship of the Ring. Imagine having to wait like a year to see what happens. Now, yep. So, what else? I think one thing that when I was reading Two Towers was, especially with I'm trying to how like it hope definitely, and you mentioned this earlier with how it plays in the U catastrophe. There's these little bits and pieces where hope is like kind of not interjected but are brought out, and I think one of the more obvious ones in book 3 is the Ents, and then Gandalf coming back, which is interesting because I've seen I think two different interpretations of they see. I don't know if it was before they see the in book 3 Treebird. I don't know if it was in Treebird or Uruk-hai. It was either chapter 3 or chapter 4. They think they see an old man in Treebird's in Fangorn Forest. On one hand, people think that was Saruman for some reason, and then on the other hand, they think it's Gandalf. So
I think Gandalf does later say when they're reunited that it wasn't him. So
Yep.
I think it was Saruman.
that part is like that part was also you're oof, that's dang, you remember that. I do. I just had to get my mind jogged. Yeah, he does say that wasn't he's like, what are you talking about? That wasn't me. Which actually we could pull up the map. We could pull up this fancy smancy Lord of the Rings project map, and we could just simply click on Gandalf the White. So it does put him through there.
Yeah, because they meet him in Fangorn Forest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It says it wasn't him who they saw earlier.
That is so creepy. He just, oh my gosh. Then what was Saruman doing there?
Trying to throw him off.
Tried to throw him off.
Yeah,
Oh
because
my
I
God.
think he like scares off their horses. They wake up in the morning, the horses are gone.
And he had to leave just to do that. I wonder if it was the Palantir that showed him to do that or something.
Could be.
Yeah. Man, that part was like, yeah, when Gandalf admitted was like, oh shoot, who was that guy? Because I thought it was because I still think it was even him, even if he said it wasn't him. But no, that wouldn't make any sense. Man, what else? And then in book 4 you have the hope with the writers of Ithilien, kind of like also bringing, like kind of circling back to Boromir again, kind of instilling a little bit more hope that they're at least doing excursions across the Great River Anduin, yet still known as Anduin at that part. One thing I found funny about the hills in the Emyn Muil was like they're kind of described as like when I'm thinking of a hill, I'm thinking of like a grassy knoll, but it seemed like it was like an actual like low level mountain where you would go bouldering on, which is like what basically you do, but like safer. Here at the well, that part was kind of interesting. And then I think the funniest part about the first few chapters of book 4 was like, we need rope. I have rope. And there was this whole rope thing that kind of carried over from, let me get the book here, from the Fellowship of the Ring. Oh my gosh. Look at all my tabs. I try to keep them color coordinated, but then it kind of ended up getting all over the place. Yeah. And then it got to the point where like, oh man, I'm all out of this color. Well, let's just use something else. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. What else about Two Towers? I think it wasn't a drag, but it was definitely like I think it was also like a little bit of a breath before it gets really, really intense, which is probably why. That's one thing that I saw. Now this isn't Two Towers exactly, but that's why I like Tom Bombadil so much, because it was a breath of fresh air and like a what the heck is going on here, otherworld kind of thing, until it gets really, really serious at Elrond or not. That's not chronological. Like Frodo getting injured, him getting basically all of them getting chased,
Yeah.
was a breath of fresh air. And you kind of get that with the Rangers before they finally make the last bout out. But anything else interesting about Two Towers you'd like to share before we kind of close up here?
No, I think we've gone over pretty much everything
Yep.
pretty well.
I think one thing we definitely could talk about, and I could at least ask your final thought is, like, it is like way too obvious how, like, especially how it's described Isengard got industrialized. Like, it is really like a pastoralism work versus industrialization with that with how they how Isengard got developed, and then you have like the Ents as like kind of like that retribution of when nature. But I think what anything else that I can kind of include here. I think reading it through and through the first time, or finally reading it from as someone who's only read it through and through once. Because there's some parts where it's like, okay, I gotta make the reading. I gotta like read it before it's due in class. But it was a pleasant read. When I'm reading it, I'm not trying to find some sort of, and I think that's one thing I like most about when I'm reading this Tolkien work, at least in the Lord of the Rings, is I'm not trying to find some like major moral explanation of it, which is probably why it attracted a lot of people. But it was, at the end of the day, the interactions between the characters, you can kind of see the friendship growing between Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn. You can see whenever like Merry and Pippin are come up, that's always like basically a delight. You don't have religion kind of shoehorned in here because Tolkien was a devout Catholic, to the point where it became like super annoying in his, not his personal life, but like in some of the stories. You can count on a single hand, or like maybe both your hands on your hand. Well, on a single hand, yeah. How many times there is like a Valar mentioned, or a religious person within the world mentioned. Like there are rites like the Rohan even burn the dead bodies of the orcs if they're able to find them. They still give a day or some time to like at least do that ritual. That part was interesting. But it makes it a lot more accessible and a lot less boring too. But definitely makes me, well, I don't ever wish I had a friendship like Frodo and Sam, because that means I would have to theoretically have a ring-esque with me, and I don't want to deal with that. I would not have, no, that would not happen. So, yeah, back to, the problem was I was supposed to end with like covering the ending, which was the funniest ending ever to like a book, which like, okay, like in the ending of The Hobbit, it was just talking about like tobacco, and in this one it's, oh, like he hits his head on a door. Yeah. So close the gate shut. Sam hurled himself against the bolted brazen plates and fell senseless to the ground. He was out in the darkness. Frodo was alive but taken by the enemy. That, talk about an ending like that,
Oh, yeah.
like taken by the enemy. You're like, ugh, like, oh boy. Yep. So, anyways, thank you again, Isaiah. I appreciate it. I'm hoping that covering the book again maybe excites you enough to read. Did you ever read The Silmarillion?
Oh yeah. I think I read that more recently.
Did you ever
than the rest?
Did you ever get Unfinished Tales? I haven't touched Unfinished Tales yet.
I'm not sure. Let me.
Yeah, here you go. And then the what it has specifically.
Yes, I got a copy of this recently.
Nice. Yeah, I went to the bookstore to buy like a nicer copy, one where I don't put a bunch of notes in of both, but then like they didn't have any nice copies at the used bookstore. But I'm definitely going to try to get my hands on like The Fall of Gondolin and that whole series. So after this, this has also been like I mentioned before we started recording, this is the most I've read in probably, I don't want to say my entire life, but this is because you're in college, you don't actually have to read. You don't actually have to read the textbooks for like my econ program, but because it's also mostly just like formulas and like theory. This one you actually have to read it, because like in the movies, like you could definitely like know if someone's read it or not. So, anyways, thank you very much, Isaiah, for giving some of your time and thoughts towards this, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.